What if Ariana Grande was a mid-60s Motown star? That's what we hope to find out on this week's What If, How and Why. Hi, my name is Morgan Brown, and every week I upload a new What If video to my YouTube channel. The idea of these videos is that each week I take a different popular song and imagine an alternative universe in which some kind of change of circumstances causes that song to come out completely different from the version that we know and love. I then take the original lead vocal of that song and record a new backing track to it using just GarageBand and whatever instruments I have around the house in order to bring that alternative version to life. So the song I chose this week was No Tears Left to Cry by Ariana Grande, and I tried to turn that into a mid-60s style Motown track. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, here's a little taster.
Ain't got no tears in my body, I ran up, but boy, I like it, I like it, I like it. Don't matter how, what, when, who tries it, we out here vibing, we vibing, we vibing. Even when it's raining down, can't stop, so shut your mouth. And if you don't know, then I know, babe, no, babe, yeah. Right now, I'm in a state of mind. I wanna be in like all the time. Ain't got no tears left to cry. So I'm picking it up, I'm picking it up.
Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, you'll probably know that I'm more or less a rock guy. I'm an old punk, also like a bit of metal. That's kind of what my background is, but I do also like a good bit of pop music. It took a while for me to accept that I did actually genuinely like pop music. I guess as a teenager, you're always a bit embarrassed about that kind of thing. You don't really want to admit that you like whatever's in the charts or on the radio, but I think these days, any sort of concept of trying to look cool has long since gone out the window, and I just like what I like. So yeah, I do always try and keep half an ear on what's happening in pop music. And Ariana Grande, I've never paid that much attention to, but over the years there have been a few songs of hers that I've thought were pretty cool. I really enjoyed Problem, apart from the Iggy Azalea verse, but pretty cool song, great drum groove, really cool kind of sax riff. And Break Free, yeah, you can't really deny that. That's an absolute belter of a song. And there are plenty of others too. But yeah, when I heard No Tears Left to Cry when that came out, it's just all over the radio for a few months, I guess. That was kind of head and shoulders above the rest for me. It's an absolute killer pop song. Just something about that chorus. It's got a really kind of massive, like yearning quality of the chorus. Really interesting harmonic structure. It's pretty simple, but there's the way it uses the same three chords, but switching the one chord from a major in the verse to a minor in the chorus, I think is really interesting and really quite cool kind of minimal production that just leaves loads of room for these big vocal arrangements. And yeah, just really effective pop record, I thought. So yeah, I've always been of the view that Ariana Grande's an okay pop singer. I had that song rattling around in the back of my mind. Probably at some point I would have thought of something that I wanted to do with it for one of these videos, but that process was accelerated when I went to see Wicked in the cinema. I've always been a bit of a mug for musicals and a bit of a fan of the old L. Frank Baum Oz books as well, so I was obviously going to go and see that, and just came out of that loudly proclaiming to anyone who'd listened that Ariana Grande is the greatest entertainer of her generation. It was just like such a great performance, so that kind of put her right back in mind. And then obviously when I was trying to think of ideas for this channel, a little light bulb pinged on and I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to do something with that song. Wasn't completely sure what I was going to do with it at first, but there's something about that chord sequence in the chorus particularly that always recalls something of that kind of mid-60s Motown sound, the kind of songs that Hall and Dozier Holland were writing for the Supremes, obviously albeit with a really different production. And I think in a way Ariana Grande has often achieved that kind of balance that Motown achieved during that sort of incredible run of hit singles throughout the 60s, where they're undoubtedly making R&B records, soul records. They totally exist within that world, but at the same time what they're doing is absolutely 100% pop as well. So it's authentic enough to appeal to the soul and R&B fans, but it's also got that kind of broad mass appeal that's going to put it on every radio station on earth and get everyone's toes tapped into it. Incredible story Motown really just as a black success story at a time when the odds were really stacked against black businesses in the States. Formed by Berry Gordy in 1959, previously Berry Gordy being involved in production and songwriting, written stuff for Jackie Wilson, but then starts this label working with the young, very young at the time, Smokey Robinson, who, as luck would have it, was, as well as a great performer, an absolute songwriting genius and an absolute production genius. And under his artistic guidance, they just launched into this unbelievable decade where I don't think any other record labels ever had a run quite like it, where for between 1961 1971 or thereabouts, they just did not release one single dud record. Everything was a classic. Just the amount of talent that they packed in there, not just performers, although there were millions of great performers, but in terms of songwriting and production teams, as well as Smokey, who could have run the whole thing on his own, really. They also had Holland, Dozier and Holland came in, who were just a total hit machine. Every time they put pen to paper, they were creating timeless hooks. And also Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong, who provided a little bit of a tougher kind of more R&B backbone to some of that Motown stuff. Definitely when Holland, Dozier and Holland left in, I think, 1967, Whitfield and Strong really came to the fore, taking over the production for the Temptations and giving them that kind of psychedelic soul thing that made them relevant all over again for a new generation, kind of connected them to that 60s counterculture. So just so many absolute powerhouses working there. And there were plenty of great record labels that had rosters of excellent talent and were producing great sort of soul and R&B records in the 60s. Obviously Stax, OK Records in Chicago was doing some great stuff at the same time, but I don't think any of them quite had the same crossover power that Motown did. And they were really astute in the way that they marketed these acts. I know the company's slogan, certainly for a time, was the sound of young America, and they really were just targeting all of young America. They didn't see themselves as, I guess, to use the old term that would have been used, a race label. It was just a label that was making music for young America, all of young America, white kids and black kids alike. And they were very careful to produce during those years a product that would appeal to black youth, but would also get a foot into the door of the broader entertainment world. And that went as far as having people who would train artists in comporting themselves in interviews, train people on how to dress. There's a whole kind of Motown charm school to just train these performers to perform and to conduct themselves in a way that would get them into places where black performers had not previously been allowed. I've read a bunch of accounts over the years, quite often from white writers actually, who would say that in a way this makes Motown less authentic. There's a feeling that there's some kind of Uncle Tomism about this, that somehow they're selling out by trying to broaden their appeal in this way. But I don't think you can deny just the incredible achievement of creating this entertainment empire that had such an unbelievably broad reach and had an influence that it is continuing to be felt today and will continue, I'm sure, for decades to come. And those songs, all those unbelievable hit singles that just kept coming all the way through the 60s, I mean, they've been the soundtrack to my life. I'm sure they've been the soundtrack to many other people's lives as well. I'm talking mainly about the singles. I mean, there are many great Motown albums too, although the albums that people celebrate tend to come later, towards the end of the 60s and into the 70s, when that sort of hit factory kind of production line approach had faded away a bit. Artists had a bit more control over their direction. You get the likes of Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye and producing great records like Talking Book and What's Going On. You get the Temptations' great run of more adventurous, heavily orchestrated albums with Norman Whitfield at the helm, that kind of thing. But for me, when I hear the name Motown, it always just conjures that amazing run of hit singles. So that kind of mid-60s, 65, 66, 67 Motown sound was really what I was ideally trying to aim for with this version of No Tears Left to Cry. In trying to turn this Ariana Grande song into a Motown track, as ever, the first thing I have to do is just take the isolated vocal and drop it into GarageBand, sync it up, and then figure out what tempo I'm going to go at. think with this one, I possibly just slightly amped up the tempo just to really make sure it felt super energetic. I guess the original's got a quite modern electro funk kind of beat to it. For my Motown one, there are several different iconic Motown beats I could have gone for, but I thought for this song it really worked to just have that thing that they do where there's just a solid snare on every beat of the four with just the kick drum providing some punctuation in between. It's just that stomping kind of high energy feel that you get from a lot of those classic hits. Reach Out, I'll Be There by the Four Tops, that kind of thing. That's sort of what I was aiming for. And with the kit, I also added various bits from the GarageBand bank of loops at different points, just extra percussion. So there's some congas that come in at various points and some tambourine as well. And then I also played in a bit of woodblock that comes in a bit later on too, because there's always a lot of heavy percussion on those kind of classic Motown records. So I wanted to reflect that. Bass-wise, those Motown records have some of the greatest bass playing that I've ever heard on them. In fact, everyone who played on those records was a great musician. A lot of the time there were people who had a jazz background, but they weren't playing anything particularly jazzy. They were just playing exactly what they needed to play with tremendous taste and feel. So it's a pretty tall order for me to try and replicate. I'm not much of a bass player. I tend to play the bass like a guitar. So I've been trying over the course of these videos to improve my fingerstyle bass playing, because it's something that kind of helps the authenticity of a record if you have the correct style on there. So I was quite pleased with how the bass line came out. Played it all fingerstyle. It's a fairly simple bass line, but I think it kind of fits the Motown feel pretty well. So I was quite happy with that. I put on an organ and a piano, just basically playing the same thing, hand left and right. And down the middle, I've also got a vibraphone, which I thought was a nice touch. I think you can hear that on quite a lot of those mid-60s Motown records. Just adds a nice extra shimmery texture in there, which is quite unusual in pop, but is a bit of a Motown feature. And then a couple of guitar tracks, not playing anything too fancy, just one of them doing a really clipped, tight rhythm, and the other one playing something slightly looser and strummier, and then when you get to the chorus, it just zips up an octave and plays a bit of a high octave pedal note. I was obviously thinking of the guitar part in the chorus of You Keep Me Hanging On by the Supremes, which is one of my favourite little hooks in a Motown song. Then added just some GarageBand horns, providing a bit of extra body to the choruses. Didn't do anything too over the top with them. There's no kind of big horn hooks or anything. They're just providing a warm kind of extra chordal texture in there. And then in the later choruses, I popped on a few woodwinds as well. So clarinet, an oboe, and a flute, just playing a little high answering figure to the vocal and over the chorus, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the real challenge, I guess, was just trying to mix it so it sounded like a Motown record, because certainly those mid-60s Motown records have a really unique sound. It's sometimes quite hard to pick out exactly what the individual instruments are doing, because everything's just compressed into this warm blast of exciting sound. It's a bit like a softer, more sophisticated version of what Phil Spector was doing with his Wall of Sound records a few years earlier. So I tried to achieve a bit of that feel by putting some overdrive on a few of the instruments, so they just sounded like they were just kind of edging over into the red on the console. And then when I got all my levels set, the overall EQ, I just pushed up the middle on it a bit and just took off the kind of very low frequencies and the very high frequencies, so it just kind of felt a bit like that middly, valvey, compressed recording quality that you get on those mid-60s records. And then for the video, I found some live footage of Ariana doing the song, popped it into black and white so that it had a bit of a period feel to it. it, and then mix that in with some footage of various retro dancers just shaking their thing, and also some little clips from a very old Motown roadshow. So you've got the band in the back playing along, and then I think some fancy footwork from the members of the Miracles, things like that, just to give it that Motown review kind of vibe. So I hope you enjoyed it. I think it came out okay. It's not one of the most spectacular transformations of a song I've done, but I love the song and I love Motown, so I quite liked putting that song into that historical kind of context. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe. That always helps a great deal. And if there's anything you'd like me to try in upcoming weeks, any songs you'd like me to have a go at, any artists you'd like me to take a look at, or any genres you'd like me to try my hand at, please do let me know. It's always a learning process doing these videos. Now, that's one of my favorite things about it. I learn something new every week, so I always welcome your suggestions. But otherwise, that's it from me for this week. So thanks very much indeed for watching. I'll see you next time.